In 1995, Sega released one of the best adventure games on the Saturn, Magic Knight Rayearth. Often remembered as a mere footnote for being the final American Sega Saturn game, there is an amazing story behind all of it, where Sega tried once again to mash up games and anime with very successful results. Hold on to a dream and stay here for the story of Magic Knight Rayearth. If you've ever played Magic Knight Rayearth, you already know that the game fits well in a subgenre that flourished in the 1990s, the anime RPG. Though not every game in this style was a true role-playing game, the name just works. Magic Knight Rayearth stands alongside games like Cosmic Fantasy, Popful Mail, and many others. The gameplay is sword and sorcery, with some strategy, only to take a break every now and then to show fully animated and voiced dialogue that moves the story along. However, unlike most anime RPGs out there, Magic Knight Rayearth was based on a proper anime series, one that Sega had a heavy hand in creating. This wasn't the first go-around for Sega. In the 80s, Sega worked directly with animation studios 3 times, creating what is called in Japan a media mix. The results were Zillion, Borgman, and Magical Hat. With all 3, Sega offered up a financial stake, which led to some creative control over the series, and the exclusive rights to games, toys, and anything else that would come down the line. Zillion spawned 2 Master System games, several action figures, and an interactive game similar to laser tag. Sega characters and video games appeared in the series often. The Zillion gun became the Master System light phaser outside of Japan. Borgman had 1 Master System game. The weapons used in the series carried over into a line of toy guns as well. Zillion and Borgman were rather similar with a dark, futuristic sci-fi tone, centered around a team of young soldiers tasked with thwarting an alien invasion. The 3rd series went in the opposite direction, shifting gears to a more lighthearted and whimsical adventure, where a young boy inherits the powers of his legendary ancestor to save the world. Naturally, Magical Hat became its own video game on the Mega Drive, though only in Japan. It was reworked for the West, a la Super Mario Bros. 2, into Decap Attack for the Genesis. After 3 years and 3 attempts, Sega suddenly hit the brakes. There were several reasons for the change-up. Media mixes were expensive. The animation houses put up a lot of money too, but a simple licensing deal cost much less. It just makes more economical sense to go the traditional route, cramming a TV show into a game, even when it doesn't work. The games didn't really reflect what was happening in the weekly series. 8-bit and 16-bit games just didn't have the power to convey all the elements of a TV show. Looking at them side by side, you can see they're related, but it's just not close enough. Also, Sega's profile in home gaming expanded with the Mega Drive and Genesis. With original creations like Sonic, the games were selling fine all by themselves. Even in Japan, the Mega Drive had a 20% market share in its heyday. However, during the time between Magical Hat and Magic Knight Rayearth, several key events made media mixes worth exploring again. Sega acquired several outfits in the 1990s. One addition, the Yonezawa Toys Company, entered the portfolio in 1991. The takeover made Sega the largest toy manufacturer in Japan. The next year, Sega brought anime studio Tokyo Movie Shinsha, TMS for short, into the fold. TMS had produced several well-known works in Japan since the 1960s. Lupin III and Detective Conan are only 2 of TMS's most well-known works. Then, technology finally took the jump it needed with the Sega Saturn. Though not released in Japan until November 1994, the project had been worked on for quite some time, with previews showing a massive leap in graphical detail. With the Saturn, full-screen, full-motion video was easy to achieve, with a level of quality around that of the VCD, a forgotten format between VHS and DVD. Sega now had more capital, control, and horsepower than ever before. The 3 obstacles that kept media mixes like Zillion from being more immersive and more profitable were now cleared. At the June '94 Tokyo Toy Show, Sega unveiled the finished Saturn to the world, and with it 12 games. Alongside Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, and Panzer Dragoon was Magic Knight Rayearth. And with it, the announcement that a full anime series would appear alongside the game in the very near future.
今、伝説のマジックナイトが誕生した。異世界セフィーロで夢とロマンの戦いが始まる。マジックナイトレイアース、10月17日月曜夜7時30分スタート。
The other side of this media mix began in November 1993, when a new manga series, Magic Knight Rayearth, appeared in the pages of Kodansha's Nakayoshi magazine, a monthly shoujo manga publication. Shoujo manga are targeted at teenage girls and often feature women in relatable or aspirational roles. The authors of Magic Knight Rayearth were a group known as Clamp, women who worked closely together, writing and drawing each work as a team, while managing the entire business themselves. Clamp began with 11 members, though by 1993 was down to just 4, who still work together to this very day. The series stars 3 middle school girls that are somehow, mysteriously, teleported to a far-off world, Sephiroth, where these girls are called up to become the saviors of this distant realm. Magic Knight Rayearth quickly became Clamp's most popular work. Sega stepped in and offered a partnership, one that led to a full weekly series, as well as a line of toys and several video games across 1994 and 95. Under Sega, TMS commissioned a 20-episode series, an adaptation of the story already seen in print. Hikaru Shido, Umi Ryuzaki, and Fu Hooji are strangers brought together by fate when they meet during a seemingly normal field trip to Tokyo Tower. Accompanied by a great flash of light, they hear a mysterious woman's plea to save Sephiroth, and the junior high heroines are suddenly swept away by a giant flying fish. Afterwards, they arrive in an unknown land where they encounter a man called Master Mage Clef. Clef informs the girls that they were summoned by Princess Emerald to fulfill their destinies as magic knights, restoring peace and balance in Sephiroth. The formerly lively and peaceful land has been in disarray ever since High Priest Zagato imprisoned the princess, who acted as Sephiroth's pillar of stability. The Magic Knights reluctantly accept Clef's words as truth and embark on a journey to save Sephiroth from the clutches of evil. The 3 girls are trapped in Sephiroth until they can rescue Princess Emerald, and if they can't, Sephiroth will self-destruct, as only the princess, the pillar, can keep this world in balance. To reach Emerald, Hikaru, Umi, and Fu must summon and harness the power of the 3 legendary rune gods, which will transform the girls into the Magic Knights. Soon after arriving in Sephiroth, the heroines meet Presea, a blacksmith who forges the swords used by Hikaru, Umi, and Fu in battle. As they depart, she entrusts the girls with Mokona, a cheerful, fluffy creature that looks a bit like a rabbit. Mokona joins the quest and offers her help as a guide. Clef, though turned to stone, is featured in many episodes, communicating telepathically with the 3 heroines. Along the way, several main characters come and go. Most are aligned with Zagato, a few are on the side of good, and loyalties are never permanent. There's Fario, a swordsman who the girls come across in the Forest of Silence. Fu develops a crush on him, though it's hard to tell how he feels at first. Ascot, a young orphan boy who appears from time to time. Despite his small size, he is a powerful summoner who can call up monsters, known as Palu, to do his bidding. Caldina, a deadly assassin for hire, who seems to have an endless set of skills, working as a dancer, hypnotist, and illusionist, doing absolutely anything for money. Over the course of the series, she finds a moral center, and her real personality is shown. And Lafarga, the captain of the guard and personal protector of the princess. He briefly turns to evil under the spell of Zagato. Along the way, each of the 3 heroines confront one of Zagato's henchmen that blocks the way to the altar of the rune gods. After each battle, one of the girls takes on the spirit and power of that rune god, as well as taking their names. Umi becomes Magic Knight Celis, Fu, Magic Knight Wyndham, and Hikaru, the eponymous Magic Knight Rayearth. It all leads to a final confrontation with Zagato, where the true reasons for kidnapping Emerald are revealed, as well as shocking revelations behind the journey that Hikaru, Umi, and Fu have been a part of the entire time. With the benefit of full color and sound, the world of Magic Knight Rayearth came to life big and bold. The 3 heroines were color coordinated, Hikaru in red, Umi in blue, and Fu in green. As an aside, their names correspond with the Japanese words for light, sea, and wind, respectively. And these elemental powers are harnessed by the characters in the series. With a game in the works to tie in the anime, role-playing elements were included into the story arc. Each episode was treated as a quest, with new locations being explored. New characters appear, and a few return as the story progresses. The characters also level up, with weapons and armor that evolve in several stages, from the first episode to the last. When these reach the final stage, Hikaru, Umi, and Fu truly earn the title of a Magic Knight. Each episode is filled with drama and tension. There's often a feeling of self-doubt and helplessness. The trio is never quite sure if they can complete the mission, and are homesick, worrying about the lives they've left behind. As the plot unfolds, so do backstories. The girls bond and forge a friendship through the events at hand, as well as by learning about each other's lives before they met. Hikaru misses her 3 older brothers greatly. They were always there to protect her, making this adventure the first time she's ever had to fight for herself. Umi often frets about an upcoming fencing tournament she will have to compete in after returning home. Fu comes from a well-to-do family and is enrolled in a private gifted school and is also a member of the archery club. Just maybe, she feels a little bit relieved to be away from all of it, despite the dangers she faces now. And, strangely enough, all of the characters who reside in Sapphirow are named after cars that were on sale in Japan in the 80s and 90s. All of it began in October 1994. The original set of 20 episodes aired weekly until March 1995, all while the manga series was in print and the Sega Saturn game was being readied for release. In April 1995, a second series began with a very different tone, a different story, and some characters not featured in the manga or upcoming video game, though the events are a continuation of where the story ended in the original. The second series ran for 29 episodes, concluding in November 1995. A 3-part OVA was released in 1997, departing even further from past adventures. Once hitting the airwaves in 1994, Sega Toys released a line of goods for fans at home to capture the feeling of the series. Dolls of Hikaru, Umi, and Fu were sold front and center in the toy aisle. With these figures, girls could play out scenes from each episode or create stories all their own. There were weapons and armor girls could wear. There were gloves and pendants, as well as replica swords, perfect for dressing up. Other odds and ends were sold, such as a fortune-telling card kit and a jewelry case that plays a music box rendition of songs from the show. While everyone was waiting for the Sega Saturn version of Magic Knight Rayearth, Sega released a Game Gear version of the game first. Alongside a bright red Rayearth edition of the Game Gear, this portable 8-bit version is a simple turn-based RPG, and rather short, taking only a little over an hour to finish. A simulation game, Making of Magic Knight, followed a few months later. At the same time, the first collection of monthly strips were compiled into a complete book. Eventually, 6 volumes were released. All of it set up the soon-to-be-released video game, set to go on sale in the summer of 1995. Soon it would be time for the Magic Knights to travel to Sapphirow on the Sega Saturn. Production for Magic Knight Rayearth on the Sega Saturn began as immediately as it did with the anime at the end of 1993. Rieko Kodama was drafted to direct. She had just finished Phantasy Star 4 and brought along a few members from that team. Designer Yasushi Yamaguchi, the creator of Tales, and head writer Akinori Nishiyama, nicknamed Locky P, who had worked on Phantasy Star 1 as well as Sonic 2. The only major player from Team PS4 to not join was Toru Yoshida, aka Yoshibon, who would soon begin work on Sakura Wars. Coming fresh off Phantasy Star 4 was a lucky break, having one of Sega's most skilled directors lead a team that was already in RPG mode, going into a game with high expectations. The core team worked closely with the TMS Animation Studio to preserve the look of the series and keep the story of the game close to what was broadcast every week. Atsuko Ishida, who directed several episodes of the series, directed the in-game animations. The core story is the same as the manga and anime. The team deviated a bit with extra dialogue, side quests, locations, and minor characters that gave Rayearth for the Saturn some originality. The game is presented as an action RPG. All three characters, Hikaru, Umi, and Fu, are playable, though only one can be controlled at a time, forcing the player to tag in that character that works best in each situation. Each heroine has a special weapon. Hikaru uses heavy swords. Umi uses a foil, one of those bendy swords used in fencing, while Fu uses a bow and arrow, meaning you have characters skilled in short, mid, and long-range attacks. Each can cast spells which correlate to the elements of their rune gods from the series: fire, water, and wind. The leveling system does not use traditional experience points, like most RPGs. Instead, leveling up occurs after key events in the game, mirroring the series. It gives the difficulty some balance. You can never be underleveled, and you don't really need to grind either. In the end, you aren't really leveling up because you can't get stronger until the game lets you. The only exception is HP and MP, which can be raised by finding magic jewels that do so. The game plays a lot like The Secret of Mana, with its 3-player team and action elements. However, there is a strain of Phantasy Star 4 that runs through the game. Superfluous dialogue, especially when interacting with objects, is everywhere. It's also worth checking out just to see what the characters will say. Hikaru, Umi, and Fu also maintain journals that give further depth to the story. All of the characters from the series are here. The main quest follows the same chain of events as the anime. The game begins at Tokyo Tower and moves through several dozen areas: the Forest of Silence, the Tree of Life, all the way to Zagato's Palace, and everywhere in between. And of course, the main draw, that beautiful full-screen animation that takes place throughout. Over 40 cutscenes were created just for the game. Many occur before or after a major event, though a few are just there to fill in spaces along the way. Not to mention the full opening from the series and a lengthy ending, which, by the way, will not be spoiled here. The build-up for Rayearth on Sega Saturn was immense. Famitsu Magazine previewed Magic Knight Rayearth extensively over the course of 1995. Each article discussed the gameplay mechanics as well as the differences between the anime and the game, at least for what was known at the time. Commenters also opined their expectations for the games once released. In September 95, Famitsu gave Magic Knight Rayearth a cross-review score of 26 out of 40. The reviewer stated that the effort put into the animation was extraordinary. The backgrounds were super beautiful, and the amount of speech makes it easy to be drawn into the game. The staff closed out their thoughts by saying that, though it's a girls' game and a bit boring, it will be seen as a success by fans of the series. However, if you don't know the source material and aren't hooked right away, you won't enjoy this game. Despite the mid-range score given to Rayearth, the game immediately went to number 1 on the Japanese sales charts, knocking out the previous champion, Yoshi's Island, while fending off several other newcomers. Rayearth stayed in the top 10 throughout September and dropped out of the top 30 by the end of October. The game stayed in print after the finale of the series and continued to sell moderate numbers into 1996.
RPG Magic Knight Rayearth.
In the US, the anime RPG genre had a small but devoted audience, thanks entirely to working designs. The company embraced the art of localizing Japanese games that were ignored by larger companies. Many of these games were considered too weird and too Japanese for American consumption. Thanks to a curiosity of Japanese pop culture that emerged in the 90s, enough of an audience was there. One of the oldest games of the genre, Cosmic Fantasy II, was brought to the West on the TurboGrafx CD. Subsequent working designs releases were scooped up by fans. However, the TurboGrafx CD had less than 40,000 units in circulation, making the maximum possible number of sales very small. When Sega released their own CD player, the install base was 10 times larger from the start. Working designs quickly switched over. There were many great titles in Japan to choose from, and from there, Working Design's fanbase grew and grew, with games such as Lunar, The Silver Star, and Vi on Sega CD. For such a small publisher, Working Designs had a close relationship with Sega, which continued with the Saturn, where even more Japanese games made it across the sea. Working Designs had scheduled the American Magic Knight Rayearth for June of 1996. However, the game wasn't released until December 11th, 1998, 2.5 years late, and into a world where the Sega Saturn was dead, buried, and forgotten. There were 3 major roadblocks that delayed the game. First, Working Designs had to negotiate the rights, not only with Sega, which was the easy part, but also Clamp and their publisher, Kodansha Media. Clamp was readying the manga and anime for an English localization. Changes to character names, their spellings, logos, and voice acting slowed things down. It resulted in the game being a little different, featuring an original song in the American version, made just for the game. Working Designs also used their own voice actors, ones that had appeared in games before and after Rayearth. Second, the game code itself went missing. After the Japanese version was finished, the data was stored away in Sega's servers, which sometime afterwards crashed. Much of the original code was gone. Working Designs had to rebuild the game on its own. Being a small localizer and not a proper developer made the process slow and difficult. Lastly, the fortunes of the Sega Saturn itself had turned on a dime. Sega had always trailed behind the Sony PlayStation, but the gap was bearable until the N64 arrived, which drew away potential customers. Then, after Final Fantasy VII was released, Sony just ran away with the whole thing. Working Designs' relationship with Sega changed when Bernie Stolar became COO of Sega of America in 1997, after leaving rival Sony. Bernie didn't care much for 2D graphics, RPGs, or Japanese-themed games, and is rather famous for declaring that the Saturn was not Sega's future. The only upside was that now Working Designs could develop PlayStation games, which raised the company's profile and profits further than ever. Work on Rayearth was allowed to continue, but things took so long that the game was only ready after Sega had officially discontinued the Saturn. There wasn't even a way to properly market the game. Specialty stores like Babbage's sold a few copies, but if you got your games from Kmart or Toys R Us, you were out of luck. The Saturn corner was long gone. Only a few thousand copies were ever made, leaving Rayearth as one of the rarest games out there. Today, used copies start at $1,000, while the Japanese version can be found used for around $20. In the game itself, there are many changes from Japan to America. Much of the recorded dialogue was removed. Some of this took place in towns. In the Japanese version, this can't be skipped. You have to listen to it every time, even if it's for the 10th time. Everyone knows RPGs involve returning to locations and engaging in a lot of trial and error conversations. So in a way, it's slightly better because the pace of the game is sped up. To make up for these lost recordings, the journal entries are now narrated. A very nice touch, and actually very personable, hearing the thoughts of the main characters.
Rafarka seems to be suffering from amnesia. I believe it must have been brought on by the shock when he fell from the Sky Garden.
The game was made more difficult. The original version was criticized for being too easy as the game moves along. Once certain skills like Fu's lock-on attacked are learned, you can basically move through the game unharmed. In the American version, enemies are faster, do more damage, and attack more frequently. The game also featured unlimited saves, over just 3 in Japan. This was done so that players could save before cutscenes, and then return to them and watch them over and over again, while keeping one main save file for finishing the game. The in-game text that doesn't affect the story is radically different. Working Designs was rather famous for including American jokes and references into their games, which in the 21st century has fallen out of favor for a preference of adhering to the original Japanese script. If you like the way Working Designs localized their games, you'll find it hilarious and one of the best games they've ever done. If you don't, then just try to appreciate the beauty of the game, I guess. There's also a section to listen to outtakes and bloopers of the recording sessions.
I sounded like I was having hemorrhoid problems.
The packaging was improved upon what was sold in Japan. As standard for Working Designs, a full-color manual was included, with a long letter from the team explaining the long process the game took, as well as an apology for all the delays. The game disc had 3 different designs, one for Hikaru, Umi, and Fu. You wouldn't know which cover you got until the game was opened. Collecting all 3 has to be expensive and extremely difficult, thanks to so many collectors who don't actually play games, hanging on to sealed copies. Despite Magic Knight Rayearth coming out after the Saturn was finished, Electronic Gaming Monthly was one American publication that maintained Saturn coverage all the way to the end. In May 1998, EGM gave an in-depth preview of Rayearth, with a release announced for that month. The article discussed the long road the game had taken, while telling fans that the wait is almost over. News fell silent for several months, but EGM returned with a review crew score of 28.5 out of 40 in January 1999. The review was rather critical about working design's changes, most notably the missing spoken dialogue, saying that the lack of conversation in-game being replaced with reading journal entries was a waste, because much of the drama, especially later at crucial parts of the game, is gone because of the omission of the voices. Each reviewer praised the game's visuals, saying Rayearth had the best 2D graphics ever seen in an RPG, and an enchanting atmosphere that needs to be experienced. The crew was critical about the game's difficulty and voice acting, saying that the game was still a bit too easy, and some of the characters sounded downright terrible. As for being the last Saturn game, the review crew said that the system is ending on a fairly good note. A great way for the 2D system that could to go out, and was worth the wait.
光る風海を究極のマジックナイトに君が育てるマジックナイトレイアース2ゲームギアから。
Though Magic Knight Rayearth was the end of the road for the Sega Saturn, there is a little bit more to the story of Hikaru, Umi, and Fu. After a few false starts in getting the series onto American TV, the entire series was dubbed into English and released on VHS in 1999. DVD and Blu-ray reissues later followed. Rayearth was also dubbed into other languages and broadcast around the world, heard in French, Spanish, Polish, Korean, and Turkish language dubs. There were Magic Knight Rayearth games outside of the Sega sphere, 1 on the Super Famicom and 2 on the Game Boy. Released in 1995 by Tomy, these are straightforward, turn-based RPGs that are tied more closely to the manga than anime. This allowed Tomy to make an end run around Sega, who naturally shared the rights of their own anime studio. The releases were rather timely, coming around in the summer of 1995, almost at the same time as the Sega Saturn version. But Sega still came back with one more Rayearth game for the Sega Pico, the computer that thinks it's a toy. Magic Knight Rayearth Tanjo is aimed at younger children, featuring quizzes and minigames starring Hikaru, Umi, and Fu. Lastly, Magic Knight Rayearth is set to make a comeback in 2025 with an all-new series to celebrate its 30th anniversary. This follows the course set out by other anime from the 80s and 90s that are receiving modern remakes, such as Urusei Yatsura and Ranma 1/2. What will the future be for Hikaru, Umi, and Fu? We will just have to wait and see.
Who is it today? Today, it's Makona! Hey, everybody! Did you guess right? I'll see you later!